Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Nizer.
My guest today is Matt Peterson, who's a software engineer, MBA, co-founder, and the CMO of Jive Communications out of Orem, Utah. Jive is one of a handful of major players duking it out in the $40 billion plus market to replace old corporate phone systems with cloud-based unified communications. And yes, there really still are traditional corporate phone systems out there in the world. And apparently there's gold in them. Their phones, at least when it comes to the legacy corporate systems, long overdue for an upgrade to more modern technology. So having a software engineering background sure makes sense in this particular vertical, but I'm really interested to know how Matt sees himself and his role as CMO, perhaps employing a different set of skills than the traditional CMO might have. So Matt, welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite.
Thanks, Drew. It's my pleasure to be here.
That's very cool. So when you think of tech companies vying for dominance in the telephony market, Utah isn't usually the place that immediately comes to mind. I mean, we did some work with Avaya, and they started out here where all the telephony began. How did sort of Jive come out of Orem? How did this whole thing come together?
That's a good question. I mean, it's a pretty organic story. As you mentioned, I'm a software engineer by trade. Most of my career has been on the development side. Back in 1999, we started a software engineering firm and grew that to about 25 or 30 employees, and ended up needing sort of a phone system. Started pricing out, various phone systems out there and choked on the cost of these things. And realized, we had the skill set to put together, one of our own. And so we built, kind of the first version of the product that ultimately became Jive. Sold most of the assets out of the software engineering company a few years later, and took some of the remaining employees out of that company and formed a new company called Jive Communications. And really, had launched our product into our existing customer base from that software engineering firm. Just kept having more and more demand, kept telling more people about what we were doing. Really, word of mouth was our initial sort of go-to-market. And kept iterating on the product and realized we could do it, in a hosted sort of cloud-based environment ultimately. And that was really the genesis of Jive. It's a pretty organic story.
And no, it's really cool. And it's funny. There are a lot of companies that sort of happen that way where they started down one road. I mean, DoubleClick spun out of an agency who was trying to figure out how are we going to deal with ads on the internet. And I know there are lots of stories like that. So it makes sense. I think it's hard for businesses to sort of recognize and leave where they started behind. So there was some courage there just to say, oh, well, I guess we're going to do something else. And that gets me to the sort of, how did you end up being CMO?
Yeah, that's a great question too. I didn't really envision, me ever being, executive on the go-to-market, on the sales and marketing side as I started my career, but really being opportunistic, keeping my eyes and ears open to the opportunities that are out there. And really, as we started expanding our engineering team at Jive, I hired, someone who I thought was a world-class telecommunications engineer, and quickly realized that, I had his job. So I relinquished my role as the CIO and handed over the reins, and we've never sort of looked back. We've had some, obviously some changes since then. That was several years ago. And I was the most opinionated one out of my founding partners as far when it came to branding and messaging. I had written our initial website and a bunch of our data sheets because we literally didn't have anyone else to do it. I mean, Jive is about a 10-year-old company. We've had our marketing department for just 2 or 3 years now. Literally did not have a single marketing employee for the first 6 or 7 years of the company. And so as we kind of got together and talked about it as partners, we knew we were going to have to do a better job. When we want to go to the next plateaus of leveraging marketing and public relations, to go to the next level. And I took that on as a challenge. And, I have to say that it is quite a bit more challenging, I think, than the engineering side. With engineering, you can program something once, and when it misbehaves, you can get it and understand why it's misbehaving. But the sales and marketing side is much more about interacting with people, motivating people, understanding their ambitions, their motivations, their buying behavior, how they like to interact, how they like to communicate, what exactly gets them out of bed in the morning. And I find human beings to be quite a bit more complicated than computers at this point.
It's so funny. Spoken like a true engineer. This is the quote, the headline so far: marketing is harder than engineering. And I think it's harder particularly if you're an engineer, because there's sort of, an expectation that an action and a reaction, and you do this and you move on to the next. And marketing is a much fluffier fellow. And it's funny, I know I interviewed John Miller, was one of the co-founders of Marketo and I think like a neuroscience major from Harvard. He ended up in marketing, as well, sort of accidentally, and then has gone on to start Engagio. Do you find yourself sort of bringing a more disciplined approach and looking for marketing with a sort of, I do this and this will happen, a sort of a direct, correlation between cause and effect?
Well, that's definitely the attitude I've started with. And I think to the chagrin of a bunch of our marketing team at this point, I still find myself sort of, looking back to how we used to run things in our engineering department to get results. One of the first activities I kind of undertook was dissecting our existing marketing spend and trying to, get the correlation between sales, and marketing spend, the attribution problem. Realized it was, multi-layered, complicated. I started making some adjustments. And I created some campaigns, and we went out and spent, more money and reallocated some different money, and it literally had zero effect on our sales, our sales teams. And I'm looking around the room trying to figure out what happened, and just realized that we're really going to have to dig in and figure out the machine. And that, spawned a couple of other, groups within the company. That spawned, our entire sales operations team, which I started about a year into the marketing gig. We realized that we needed better communication, better tools, better analytics, and needed a lot more support on the operational side of sales. Spawned our sales training group as well, and just really have had to understand that we've had to work in a cross-functional environment. Having sales ops and marketing and sales management really firing on all cylinders, working together to move the needle on the sales side.
Well, certainly one advantage that you have is you get technology. It's not intimidating to you. And so, as you are building what sounds like a pretty robust marketing stack, none of this is daunting to you. I suspect how sort of as you move to this through the attribution modeling, you think you've nailed it?
Oh, we're definitely a lot closer. I think that is one, I think you're going to see technologists start to invade marketing quite a bit more. As really these sciences are converging. You can't really be a true marketer these days without being a technologist. There's just too many valuable tools out there to be just kind of making it up and flying by the seat of your pants and going off, your own opinion. I mean, we run sophisticated A/B testing. We're doing, automated nurture tracks. There's just a litany of things that we're doing, lead scoring, that are all sort of technology analytics based. And yeah, I absolutely believe that my engineering background prepared me, to be a better CMO. Now, it didn't prepare me completely. I've had a lot to learn. I've brought in a lot of talent to the team, and, we continue to learn together. One interesting thing that we still kind of harkens back to the engineering days is we run an agile methodology here in marketing. I know that sounds a little unique. It's usually a rapid development iteration methodology. But, we have some teams that run sprints. We have a Kanban board here, and really have been able to utilize some of the value delivery methodologies out of Agile, Scrum, and Kanban that led to success on the engineering side. I really believe in those principles as general theory of effectiveness and time management. And, sometimes those don't go over quite as well with the more creative side of the fence, but we've run that to pretty good effect here at Jive.
So before we take a break, tell me what sort of the biggest learning thing that you had to do. I mean, because again, I don't think any of this technology is intimidating, and the things that you talked about in terms of agile marketing. I had a long conversation with Jerome Nadell, who brings that over at Rambus in Silicon Valley, and it seems like it's that approach is very much embraced by tech firms in general, because they just have the culture to support it. But what was the sort of the thing that you had to learn the most?
Well, I think, and again, some of my MBA prepared me for this, but really understanding more of the intangibles around alignment and buy-in. One of the reasons I sort of gravitated early in my career towards technology and computers is that I really felt, I could almost brute force my way through a lot of those, challenges. And even though my code may hadn't been perfect, and we needed to kill some bugs later, or needed to, have a little more elegance in the design, and maybe do a re-architecture at some point, I just don't think people work quite like that, and that's been a bit of a learning curve. As I've understood on the front end, you really do need to get aligned with your peers, and you need to get your teammates on board with the idea and get them excited, get them motivated, as opposed to just kind of brute forcing your way through a problem. Because people don't react like machines; they have feelings and they have opinions, and a lot of times their instinct, they want to follow their instincts. And if the data is, if the data isn't, supporting their instincts, then sometimes we run into a conflict where that dissonance is providing a significant amount of stress. And being able as a leader to kind of get through, those stressful situations and come out, maybe not friends on the other side of that, but definitely, efficient and effective coworkers is very important, and a challenge for, I think, a more pure technologist.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into some specific areas of Jive's marketing programs and see what we can learn. So we'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I wanted to use this break to ask you a single question. Are you a courageous marketer? Do you have the courage to go to your board of directors and say marketing could drive the growth of this company? We just need 3 times the budget. Do you have the courage to take the big idea that you already have and extend it internally and externally through influencers, through the media, through all of your content? If you're a courageous marketer but aren't sure how to roadmap all of this, I have a big idea for you. It's called Renegade Thinking. It's a program that we've developed and work with exclusively for B2B marketers, generally at large companies. And I want to give you my cell phone, 917-679-8852. Just text Renegade Thinking to 917-679-8852, and we can talk about how you can cut through. Okay, we're back. My guest is Matt Peterson, who is the CMO and co-founder of Jive Communications. So let's talk about, we talked a lot about the technology and sort of A/B testing and sort of optimization, but at the heart, what's at the very heart of the Jive brand?
That's a good question. Well, Jive is a unique company. We're a technology that really didn't raise, any early venture capital rounds. Again, very organic in our start. That's had a dramatic, impact on our culture. We're very scrappy. We like to punch above our weight class. At Jive, we compete in a very, very busy, very crowded, very competitive market with some of the very largest companies on the planet. We've had to figure out how to do things the Jive way, sort of come in a little bit under the radar and pick verticals and pick strategies that have allowed us to grow without the significant war chests of our peers. There's always kind of a bigger fish in telecom. We found, our pure, cloud competitor groups out there. Most of our competitors have raised, $100+ million, some multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. And really Jive, we were around for 6 or 7 years before we took our first round of funding. And even that round was a was a sort of a private growth round that really didn't infuse a ton of dry powder into the go-to-market strategy. Really used a lot of that for technology. And so we've just kind of had to do it a different way. So I think at the core of our brand is this sort of blue-collar bootstrap mentality. And, it's an aggressive growth mentality. I think we've been able to really hold our own on the growth side. We've really had to have a huge focus on our customers. They've really been the ones funding our growth. We haven't really been able to do what a lot of technology companies historically do, which is, iterate and, maybe have a couple of failures, on their product and be able to make those pivots and afford to kind of buy their way out of some of those mistakes. We've really had to, from day one, had to take care of our clients. They've been funding the growth. And so this sense of, hardworking, a little under the radar, we don't really hype ourselves a ton. We're one of the quietest, $100 million software technology companies out there. But we are realizing that to kind of move to the next level, we do have to continue to change. I think one of the things we've learned as we've had to be organic and bootstrapped is that if we're not agile, we're not reactive and proactive to our market conditions, then we're going to get quickly left behind. So it's created, I think, a real culture, a sustainable long-term focus, and I think we're going to be around for a long time.
So what, if you look at some of the marketing activities that you've done that allowed you to punch above your weight class, what were some of the, is there an example that you would say, that's Jive right there? That's something that was just that program or that campaign was just, really, really killer.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, my mind kind of goes to our verticalization strategy. So, one of the markets we attacked early was K-12 education. And one of the reasons we went there is we saw an opportunity with a federal program called E-Rate that subsidized cloud services. And it really wasn't being utilized for telecommunications or phone systems. And so we were, and became one of the leading experts in E-Rate and K-12 and, went on to dominate that market. One of the early marketing tactics we use is that, every school district out there has to apply, and the program's changed since then, but they had to apply for these E-Rate subsidies. And so we basically were able to get this public database of school districts and charter schools and all these K-12 institutions out there that were basically signaling, hey, I'm looking for this type of, communication service. And so we, scraped that database, and I wrote an application that basically turned their form submission into a PDF that looked like a custom proposal and a quote. And then we just, used sort of pseudonyms to email those out to the, people waiting for bids, and would frequently get, people calling in asking for these, sort of these fake employees that didn't exist at the time and only wanted to work with that employee that had sent them the bid. So we were actually able to make quite a bit of headway, brand-wise into the K-12 community, something that's historically been very slow, very, very painful and difficult to break into. We were actually able to break in, to that industry in about 18 months and ultimately be the largest provider of pure cloud-based telecommunications in the K-12 industry in the United States. So that's typically a Jive, a Jive mentality, the Jive way right there.
Well, there's several things that I just want to sort of punctuate. One is just recognizing verticals for a lot of B2Bs. If you can sort of find that, the genius of that plan is that the funding was waiting. They just didn't know how to get it. And so, I mean, it sounds like you solved both problems. It's like, hey, we can upgrade your communications, get you on the cloud. And oh, by the way, there's funding here. So we'll help you all the way through the process. That's kind of genius, to be able to do that. And then, so that makes a lot of sense. And then the other interesting part of that is suddenly Jive is in all these high schools. I would imagine, 4 years later, some of those people are coming out of college and they're going, oh, Jive's pretty cool. I saw them, they did the cloud systems. Was there any sort of impact on, have you been able to see that through? Some of those kids have graduated from college by now, I imagine. That's
a good question. I don't actually know if we've gotten the brand effect all the way into the students. Most of our product was utilized by administrators
Okay.
and teachers.
Yeah. All right.
What we've seen, Drew, is that this was a way for Jive to break into very large accounts much sooner than we should have been able to. And so when I say punch above our weight class, that's kind of what I mean. Typically it takes, technology startups, quite a while to kind of, utilize the low end disruptor model and kind of move up market into the, mid and, enterprise market. And we were one of the very first, sort of cloud PBX systems to, have thousands of users on a single install. And so we sort of learned how to do enterprise, level project management and field and sales engineering and had all of those, difficult, challenges to kind of overcome early on in Jive's history. And so that's really allowed us to sort of leverage those large clients into the enterprise and mid-market. And we really feel like we've achieved scale on our platform and are really feeling like we've got an edge when it comes to most of our competitors who've had to start in the micro SMB space and kind of work their way up. So that's been one sort of unexpected, boon that's come from, going heavy into K-12 early on.
Interesting. So, I happened to see one of the Will It Jive videos, and, couldn't help it. It's sort of, I felt pretty renegade, and that was, and I couldn't tell really how big, or was that just sort of a fun side project? Talk a little bit about that program.
That was a project that we did. We were doing a promotional project with Blendtec, which is another exceptionally innovative company on the marketing side here, right here, kind of locally in our valley. And we made that video a couple of years ago. Basically, the video in question here, we disassembled a bunch of PBXs and old phone systems and blended them in one of Blendtec's blenders and had sort of a cloud come out of it. It was, a pretty well done video. And I think the final phrase was, as the cloud was sort of billowing out from the destruction of this, premise-based phone system, it said your phone system in the cloud and faded to our logo. It was one of our more, I think, well done videos for sure. And it was done, kind of in conjunction with this promotion we had with another, local rock star.
Oh, that's cool. I mean, the Blendtec videos sort of set a standard for sort of how to do, interesting content marketing. It really was so fun. And the fact that they were a client makes a lot of sense. All right. We're going to take a quick break. And we'll be right back. Hey, it's Drew. I was at a conference the other day and somebody looked at my saw lapel pen and said, "What's up with that?" And I said, "Well, what's the one thing that marketing has always had to do? Forget digital, forget all this stuff. What is the one marketing imperative?" And he looked at me and went, "Cut through." And I went, "Yes, ding, 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 ding. That's right. Cut through. That is what marketing must do." And it's not just cutting through the clutter, although that's really important, because if your marketing doesn't cut through the clutter, it's like the proverbial tree in the forest that falls and nobody hears it. But it's also cutting through the crap and the processes that inhibit innovation. We've been working a lot lately with some CMOs to help them cut through the crap and get at the essence of what is their big idea. And how can they make a case to expand that idea across their business? That, to me, is cutting through. Okay, we're back, and my guest is Matt Peterson, CMO of Jive Communications. We've been talking about telephony and how a B2B brand can sort of fight above its weight. You mentioned going after the vertical K through 12. Is there another sort of program that you point to and say, yeah, that is one of that program or campaign really is a great example of what Jive is able to do from a marketing standpoint?
We realized that, to really have an impact in a market that's this crowded and with this much marketing budget behind it, we've had to be innovative and rely on, relationships and different types of sponsorships that are a little more grassroots. One example of giving ourselves sort of a hunting license was, we applied to be on the state contract for telecommunication providers for California. It's a contract called CalNet. It literally took, I think it was a 24, 36-month process. It was, a very substantial, ask for a company of our size at that time. And it literally was this, the bid was literally the size of a couple of phone books. I mean,
Wow.
I felt like I should have received a doctorate at the end of that, on state and local procurement. But Jive was awarded that contract. We were alongside AT&T and Verizon as the only entities to be able to, offer telecommunication services to, California municipalities, local governments. And that's just another sort of example of us sort of taking the measure of, of a market and understanding, how to use our limited resources to really leverage our way into substantial opportunities. So that's been one that I think we did it the Jive way. Most of the, from what we learned, I think AT&T had 20 or 25 people working on this contract. We had me at that point. I feel like, that was really that was really sort of one of our first major marketing efforts as I was starting the department and didn't really have any other employees. And I'm like, this is something I think could really affect our ability to go to market. And that's led to a lot of other state contracts and led to a lot of prestige, led to a lot of, sort of brand overlap that we've been able to leverage into, other deals. And I think strategically, that's kind of what I mean by punching above our weight class. There's really not any realistic, reason to believe we could have got that contract when we started, but we just sort of, put the blinders on and moved forward and executed and, have leveraged that into, I think, substantial, gains for the company.
Yeah, that's what we call chutzpah. When you think about your marketing, are there brands out there that you admire and say, wow, we want to be them when we grow up?
That's a great question. I think everyone sort of points to, Apple as being a standard. I think it's difficult to follow their lead, in a lot of cases. They have quite a different, product than we sell. One thing I am jealous of with a lot of our sort of SaaS, pure SaaS peers out there, like a Workday or a Salesforce, which I've read, their material and we've met quite a bit with those guys. They are able to employ a really sophisticated land and expand strategy where they're able to go in and get, a portion of somebody's business, maybe in one department and then really, market, do customer-based marketing and expand within that organization and start picking up more and more share of the wallet. Jive historically has had a tough time doing that. So we've got some new products coming out in 18 that will allow us to do, follow a Salesforce, a Marketo, a Workday's lead, and do a little more land and expand type of marketing where we can coming into an organization and without ripping and replacing everyone's, entire phone system, we can get a little bit of a foothold to be able to upsell additional products. Our PBX and hosted, telecommunications, it really is kind of a binary situation where you don't have, somebody's marketing department deciding that they're going to use, this phone system and everyone else can use whatever they want, but marketing's decided to use this tool. That's not really how our industry works.
Yeah.
And so, but that has been historically how these very powerful, very large SaaS companies have built themselves. And so we are going to try and do our best to replicate some of the tactics there. Put some products on the line card that will allow us to do that a little more. The beauty of our model is once we get an account, we get revenue from every single person in the account. So if we, sell a 500 person organization, it's not like we only get 20 Salesforce licenses in that group. We get, monthly recurring revenue from all 500 users. And so, there's good with the bad in all models. And I think, if we can incorporate some of these tactics that some of the very largest SaaS companies have used to grow, Jive's going to continue to, move forward and become a powerhouse itself. So. Yeah,
it's somehow or other the sort of the Hootsuite freemium model, right? They get you started with a free product, and next thing you know, they get 1,000 licenses at a major corporation. It's really impressive when that happens. How do you? So I'm curious because, you're in your industry, and how do you keep your marketing saw sharp? Are there resources that you go to for advice, and say, gee, this is an interesting problem. How do I solve that one?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So we have, sort of a policy in marketing that everyone in marketing needs to attend some conference that's related to, at least loosely related to their field every year. I think that's exceptionally important to get out there and sort of make new connections, make new friends, talk about different ideas. So getting out there is an important thing. As an executive Jive, I'm traveling, constantly, able to meet and talk with people, from all over the world in a lot of different trade shows and conferences on airplanes. And so I try and take advantage of that. I also, I'm a pretty avid reader. So I think, this sort of hunger for knowledge, from multiple different types of sources is critical to staying sharp. And I've encouraged, my team members to do that stuff as well, because really, especially as I've come over from more of a pure engineering, background, there's a lot of fundamental things that A, Jive wasn't doing on the marketing side, and B, I didn't know. So I've really had to get educated quickly, on all the latest sort of, marketing techniques and tactics and platforms out there. I mean, I literally did not know what, lead scoring was when I started, as a marketer, and, understanding exactly, where, these leads were coming in on the various parts of the funnel. Understanding how to do, nurture tracks and moving, in 18 towards more account-based marketing, understanding the value of content and driving organic. I mean, those are all things I've had to learn in the last couple of years. And so I credit, my awesome team, the team members. Sterling's one of those guys. We've been learning, cutting our teeth a little bit in the public relations and media together. And, just having that excitement, that energy, that flair for, tackling new challenges has been critical for our success in marketing.
Is there any one book or two books that you've read that were like just, aha, this really helps?
Oh man, that's tough to pin one of those down. We did read Traction together by Gino Wickman.
Love it. Yep.
That's been a good book. I think some of that book really was maybe designed for a company that's a little smaller than Jive. We're about 700 employees here. But some of the models in that book have been very valuable for us to simplify and to come together, especially some of the values models where we understand, who we're looking for in our employees and our salespeople has been very useful. And that's probably the last book we've read together was Traction by Gino. Yeah,
big fan. Listened to him and the other guy who co-wrote that. We're actually implementing it, Renegade. Have you figured out, does every employee have a number?
We do, actually. Every employee has a number. Last couple of years at Jive, we've had not only sort of individual numbers, department numbers here, but we've set company-wide goals. They've had just a dramatic impact on our business. We've, one of the pieces that we've really focused on since the beginning is our customer satisfaction. We have as far as we can tell, the highest NPS score ever achieved by a telecommunications company. And we're pretty proud of that. And that really takes a full team, a full culture, really just a whole mindset focused on delivering value to the customer. And we've actually been able to increase that substantially. We've been able to kind of run up the score here a little bit on NPS as we've tackled those and make sure everyone understands how their number impacts our customer NPS.
That's awesome. Yes. Yeah. And, I might have thought a couple of years ago that customer satisfaction in telco is an oxymoron. But given that everybody, sort of hates their phone company and their cable company. But, and then you have your personal rocks. Are you guys moving rocks around, a la Entrepreneur's Operating System?
Yeah. The rocks are kind of equivalent to the goals, the quarterly goals. And, we do reset with each other every 90 days, both, within our department, our marketing department, and then generally, at the company, we have an executive offsite every 90 days. And so we've adapted some of the models in Traction and some, haven't fit as well. But I think that's, again, being an agile, group, both in the marketing and the development side, we've been able to literally continue to iterate on our process and our organization and change as, our needs have changed. I think we'll continue to do that. We've recently brought in some new leadership as well. We've recently brought in a new CFO and a new chief revenue officer as well. And these guys are bringing a lot to the table, a lot of experience that the original founding team, didn't have, and we've been learning a lot from each other. And I think Jive will continue to be a different organization. I think that's one thing that's remained constant here is change. And but it keeps getting us out of bed, and we keep seeing the growth and the opportunity. As you mentioned at the very beginning, our total addressable market is absolutely massive. Basically, we can sell to basically any company on the planet, we've just got to be able to narrow our focus and choose the markets which we attack and really be able to penetrate well into those.
So if you haven't read Byron Sharp's How Brands Grow, highly recommend it. I've talked about it on the show before. He did an analysis of, it's all packaged goods based, but I think you'll sort of look at it and go, oh, a lot of this makes sense. It's sort of required reading for anyone at Procter & Gamble. So as we wrap this up, if you look at it and you say, all right, there's a couple of challenges that I really want to address in 2018. One of them, it sounded like you already mentioned, which is sort of how do we make it easier to land and expand? I think that's a really interesting challenge. And I think a lot of businesses are facing that. Is there one other thing that you sort of look at and say, boom, this from a marketing standpoint, if I could wave a magic wand, this is what would happen in 2018?
Well, that's a great question. I'm in the middle of writing our marketing plan with our senior leadership here, both in marketing and our executive team. So it's all fresh on my mind. It's going to be tough to pick one. I would say, if you let me do two, I would say we've got to do a better job of making sure that our messaging, our differentiation points, we're calling them our hammers, are very clearly defined. As a verticalized company, every time we add a vertical, it's almost exponential in the growth that, and the amount of requirements we have to fulfill, with the duplication of videos and data sheets and web, landing pages and sales pitches. And, so I think getting our messaging into a place where it really is resonating, and is all, sort of based on our core strengths, which is, our platform dominance, our ability to scale and our sort of obsessive compulsive focus on the customer. We need to get those messages nailed and get them in a consumable format so our sales teams can really, use them as weapons. And then second, we've got to nail a bit better of an outbound approach. We've had a lot of success with our marketing being able to really, line up quite a bit of demand for our sales teams, and sometimes they get a little too dependent on marketing. We get a little complacent. We got to, kind of move to the next level and figure out a little better outbound program, a little better field, marketing program to support our brand more regionally, where we have field and channel reps, and then do, a much better job on, sort of organic demand generation, outbound demand generation. So those will be two big areas of focus for the marketing department in 18.
Piece of cake, not a problem. Yeah. So, all right. Well, I'm going to attempt to summarize a few of the things that I heard that I think any number of brands can take away. We spent a lot of time talking about building a tech stack and getting that right, and learning sort of just basic things like lead capture and lead scoring and lead nurturing. I think the dominant thing that I took away from here, as you grow your business, growing it with verticals in mind, because you could sort of work your way from school to school to school as Jive did, and you get better and better and better. And each time you do an implementation, you also do better and better and better because you keep solving the same problem or variations on that problem. So when you finally go to your 10th school, you're just going to be the best at it. And so that improves customer satisfaction. And so while we didn't talk about that going in, one of the advantages of being in a vertical is that, if you do it right, you're just going to continue to improve, CSAT. And that's, essential because those are the people that, as you said, are financing the growth of the company. So almost every episode comes back to keeping track of your customers, taking care of them. But we all talk about it, and not that many companies do it. What was amazing to hear from Matt was that Jive, has a high net promoter score, which, again, I can tell you, I remember in the telco world, when I was working on it, there were negative numbers. It wasn't even positive. There were negative numbers in some of the cable companies, in some of the telco providers. So, Matt, I want to thank you so much for being on Renegade Thinkers Unite.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. So for my listeners, as always, you can thank me and the producers of the show by sharing the episode, liking it, leaving a review, subscribing it, and doing all those good, nice, kind things. So until next time, keep those renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.